Hello and welcome to the Autocar show. Now this is India and it's beautiful. But our roads? Well, there's lots to be said for that. They're splattered with potholes, polluted with traffic, and there's very little space for one to really put their foot down and enjoy a nice sports car. But if you're an avid adrenaline junkie like me, and you do have that need for speed, you want something that offers up that thrill, but is peppered with practicality. Well, these two cars offer just that. Practical because they're four-door, they can seat 5, and for all practical purposes, they look like regular luxury saloons. It's really what's under the skin that makes them special. Meet the E63 AMG. It has a 5.5-litre twin-turbo V8 that makes 550 bhp and 73.41 kgm of torque. And the BMW M5, which has a 4.5-litre twin-turbo V8 that makes 552 bhp and 69.3 kgm of torque. Torque here is spread nice and wide, so power kicks in where you want it to. And the E really feels nimble around corners. It feels more compact. When you get into it and you first drive it, it definitely feels far more compact than the 5 and far more manageable. The E-Class feels brutally quick when you pull all the way to the red line, and the rear's lack of roll and quick steering make it a car you can enjoy without scaring yourself. What I love most about the 550 bhp E63 is just how it shrinks around you when you drive it hard. It may have the external dimensions of a full-size luxury car, but on the move, down this mountain road, it feels not much larger than a C-Class. But despite the excitement, in the real world, it's the BMW that feels much quicker thanks to its freer revving engine and more brutal delivery of torque. It's a really exciting engine. You can rev it all the way to the 7,400 RPM mark. But you can't really lay the power down all that well, especially first, second. If you floor the throttle, traction control keeps kicking in. You really have to learn how to drive the M5. It works much better on path throttle than if you really stomp your foot down. And even when you're in the corners, ease it gently and it works much better than flat-footing it. The reason I decided to leave the traction control on is that even on a slightly wet surface, the M5 can scare you. Step on the throttle and the bellowing roar of the exhaust is accompanied by a thrilling rush of torque. And the rear, that's more than happy to step out. Initially, it's fun, but on a wet surface, it just doesn't inspire the kind of confidence the E63 does. I found myself gripping the steering hard and always on edge, trying to keep it together. Fly over a bump mid-corner, which in our conditions is all too common, and the M5 can really do the kind of jig that unnerves you. And once those rear wheels let go, it takes little more than dabs of the throttle to get it back on track. Makes you have some seriously heart-stopping moments, which is why I was happier to let the traction nannies do their work. The steering is much heavier to begin with than the E63 AMG. And in the city, it does feel like that. But out here on a nice twisty, windy section of road, it feels sharp, it feels direct. The body control of this car is just simply superb. It really hugs the corners and goes around them. The problem is that you always feel the weight of this car. It just feels very, very bulky. That's just it. On narrower roads, you always feel the bulk. And even around the corners, you know you're carrying all that weight around. On the other hand, the E63 feels quite different. Cornering in the E is quite a load of fun. Not only does this seat side come in and bolster you nicely, but steering feels direct, weighs up really well as you go faster. And as you can see, you can really push to your limits. The thing about the E is that it feels light and easy. You don't feel like you're carrying a big weight around. It feels really nimble around the corners. You're not watching the edges. In fact, I'm far more comfortable in the E63, whether I'm cutting through traffic and people or whether I'm cornering. Out on the corners on a freer section of road, you realize the AMG, with its narrower power band, feels less exciting in the lower gears. You hit the red line more often and it's not as free revving as the M5. The AMG's power is more evident as you go quicker. And in the higher gears, the AMG really comes into its own element. The surge from the 180 km per hour to the 220 km an hour mark feels so quick, it's scarcely believable. But despite the fact that it feels slower, the AMG is actually marginally quicker against the clock. The 100 km an hour comes up in just 4.86 seconds, with the M5 just a fraction of a second behind. And the Merc keeps its nose ahead till 200 km an hour, but only just. The BMW trails by only 0.31 seconds, and that's just an indication of how quick these cars are. For thrill factor, the low rumbling soundtrack of the AMG sounds deliciously menacing. The BMW is more audible thanks to an exhaust note that's pumped into the cabin via speakers. But despite that, the Merc still sounds more exciting. Both cars have 7-speed twin-clutch auto boxes, and in the manual mode, the E63 has an annoying lag to shift up, especially when you pull all the way to the red line. So, it's always better to short shift in this one. In fact, it's really better to drive it in sport mode, where the lag is done away with. The M5's gearbox feels better overall, and in its most aggressive setting, the shifts are lightning quick. So this is not really the place to be in the back seat. You'd rather be behind the wheel of this car. But if you are carrying passengers, then they'll be more comfortable in the back seat of the E63 AMG. This ride is more pliant, it's more supple, it takes the bumps and potholes better, and there's less noise filtering through as well. Well, certainly the backseat is not the place to enjoy these cars. The M5 thuds more noticeably over the rough stuff, it shuffles around more and feels less settled. No, none of these cars are as comfortable as a regular E-Class or 5 Series over poor roads due to their stiff springs, and you do get thumped around. But if you want to know which one is better overall, it's definitely the E63. Well, it's been thrilling driving these, but it's time to stop and take a look at how practical they really are. Both cabins offer levels of premiumness and luxury that you would get in any E-Class or a 5 Series, but just with a sportier edge. The E63's cabin has active seat bolters and Alcantara trim. The buttons on the center console help set up the car, and the big dial allows you to select Comfort, Sport, Sport Plus or Manual. RS is for race start or launch control. The buttons after that are for ESP and suspension settings. The AMG button can be programmed with your favorite settings. The M5 gets a hydraulic steering instead of electric, and the high dash affects visibility. Toggles at the base of the gear lever are used to quicken gear shifts. Buttons that control the steering weight, dampers and engine responses are on the right of the gear lever. And the ESP button on top can also be used to put the car in an intermediate MDM mode, where ESP only cuts in extreme cases. Well, at the beginning of the day, I didn't think this is the one that would have won me over, but it really is the E63. Now here's why. It may not have the sheer brute torque of the 5 Series engine, but it delivers power in a much better manner. So whether you're cutting through city traffic or chucking it around corners, it feels better. Not only that, it feels more nimble as well, and the steering feels nice and direct. Add to that the fact that it's got nice interiors, a comfortable back seat, it's got better ride quality than the 5 Series, makes it very practical too. Well, at the beginning we spoke about cars that offered the thrill along with practicality. Well, the E does it in just the right measures.